On today's show, the Cavs have a week to get things fixed. What exactly needs to change? Let's dive in on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. And you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show and any other Locked On podcast anywhere you get them. That means Apple, that means Spotify, that means anywhere else. Please give us a 5-star rating if you're listening, and make sure you're subscribed on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching the show as we get started, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And today's show brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Want to dive into some of the things that the Cavs need to fix because they don't play again until Friday. If you're listening to this right now, it most likely is Monday. I don't know. Maybe you listen to this a day later or 2 days later, but recording this on Monday, and the Cavs don't play again until Friday. So they have this opportunity this week to get right. And I think the schedule upcoming certainly plays into that. So I think there's one thing that's very important, plus some schematic things that also need to change. But one quick announcement too, as we begin today's show. But you're going to see this all over the place. And today is the first day that Locked On has unveiled what is our new Everydayer Club. So what the Everydayer Club is, and you will have the opportunity if you would like to sign up. A link is in the episode description, whether you're listening on whatever podcast platform you listen on, or if you're watching on YouTube right now, there is a link in that description that you can go click on to sign up. But what it gets you is get you access to a Discord where you can come chat with me during Cavs games, other Cavs fans during Cavs games, and really a really cool collection. Some other hosts from other shows too will be able to pop by and stuff like that. You will also be able to listen to Locked On Cavs wherever you get your podcasts with no interruptions. So the ads are going to be cut out. It's going to be a quicker listen for you. You are basically paying $5 a month or $50 a year to have access to a Discord, the ability to have Locked On Cavs without ads, and some other things that we're going to cook up as well. But the Everydayer Club is being unveiled today by Locked On. You can, if you want to join the Locked On Cavs Everydayer Club, the link to do so is in the description. I think it's going to be a fun time. I think we're going to have a lot of people in there. I think it'll be really cool. So if you want to come by and check it out, $5 a month or $50 for the year at the link in the description. But I do think as we talk about where the Cavs are at this week, because I do think, and I said this, if you listen to this weekend's show after the Warriors game, I think that this is the most important week of the season for the Cavs. I look at their upcoming schedule, and it's a very, very manageable one. But this is, to me, their last real opportunity to get right. And it's crazy to say that because it's December, right? But we have not seen this team be anything close to what we thought they would. And at a certain point, you have to listen to what you're being told. And the talent on this roster, I still think is second to none in the Eastern Conference. I don't think that there's a team with more talent than the Cavs have when they're at full strength. The big problem is they have not been at full strength whatsoever this year, but they've also not done things that they need to do. And that's why I think that this week, the most important thing that gets fixed is the Cavs have to do all of the little things correctly moving forward. They've got enough talent to win games, but we see what that looks like, where that has been, I think, at times a frustrating endeavor for the Cavs, where they can find ways to win where they play the style of basketball that the other team would prefer to play, or they find ways to win where they don't play all that well and you don't necessarily feel great about watching it, but it's a win and they all count the same in the standings at the end of the day. And while that certainly is true, this is something that I just don't know that is a sustainable model for the Cavaliers. So that's why I think thing number one is the effort that the Cavs play with, the spirit, or as Kenny Atkinson has termed it throughout the course of this week, using spirit basically to like that all encapsulating thing. Joy is another one. And I know that like we think of joy as being happy because you're winning, but I think that there is a certain energy, if you will, that I think of as the joy. And I do think too, the last two games for the Cavs And I know that they lost to the Warriors, and I know that that's such an embarrassing loss, and it is the worst team they have lost to this year. Again, given who was available for Golden State in that game. But I thought that the Cavs played with effort. I thought that they played the right way. And I certainly thought that they did that against the San Antonio Spurs on Friday night in their win, where they took down a good San Antonio team that was a little shorthanded too, but they've even been good when they've been shorthanded. So I do think that is something that has improved, but it's not where it needs to be still. Like, I think that we oftentimes can confuse better with good. The Cavs have been better at this stuff lately. Like, I do think Monday in Indiana, the Cavs were better at this, but they're still not good enough at it. They still need to get better at it, because I do think for all of the talent that they have, which I think is immense, it doesn't matter as much if you don't do the little things right. I've said a number of times over the past week that if you do the little things right, if the Cavs do the little things right, the big things will then take care of themselves. And of course, I say that all week. And then Saturday, I kind of think is the rare occurrence where the Cavs did not all of the little things right, but they did a lot of the little things right. And the big things did not take care of themselves. But as I go through what the Cavs have done so far, so they're 14-11 through 25 games. And I think it's fair to say that the effort level has not been where we anticipated it would be. The execution level certainly has not been where we anticipated it to be. But let's even throw aside some of that. Let's look at the 25 games, the Cavs have played so far. If they play with the proper effort and energy level in all of their games so far, what would their record have been? Now, it's not like 23-1 the way the Thunder are after they won again the other day. Like, they're not at that level, and that's okay. They don't need to be at that level right now. The Thunder don't need to be at that level. They're just incredible. But if you look at some of the game, like the Miami game that they played, that they lost in overtime against Miami, the Cavs didn't play with a great effort in that game. That was a disappointing game. They lost in overtime, but they needed a crazy comeback in order to do so. The Houston Rockets, I thought, was kind of that. The Toronto Raptors, really 2 of the 3 times. Certainly the one that the second game they played in Cleveland, I think, was the example of this. Now, yes, that was the 5th game in 7 nights for the Cavs, but that was, to me, like the prime example of not playing with enough effort, not playing with the proper spirit. I think the game in Atlanta qualifies as this. I think Boston, both times, qualifies as this. Portland, I think, is another great example of this. I think if you look at this, and it's not fair to expect the Cavs or any NBA team to have a perfect effort 82 times. That doesn't happen in the NBA. It doesn't happen really in any sport. When you have such a long season, there are going to be nights where you just don't have it. And I think that Saturday night against the Warriors was kind of one of those nights that the Cavs just didn't have it. I thought the effort was good. I thought the energy was good, but they just didn't have it. And that's okay. But it's not okay because they've had so many other games where they've not had it. And that's what makes that game not okay. And that's why, to me, the most important thing that needs to get fixed this week is the effort level, is the energy level, is the team's spirit. They need to get back to playing what Cavs basketball is. And I thought that we saw that on Friday night against San Antonio. I thought that exactly in that second half where they outscored the Spurs 44-19. I thought that's exactly what we were watching. And then it went away. Now, part of the reason why it went away is because the Cavs just missed so many shots. Like, I do wonder what things would have looked like against Golden State on Saturday if the Cavs would have just had a below average shooting game. Instead, that was the worst shooting game the Cavs have had since, I believe, March or April of 2021. They shot under 35%. They've not done that in 4 years. The last time they had a game shooting like that, Colin Sexton was the team's leading scorer. So that just puts in perspective how bad the shot making was. And that is something that I do think, because of it being such a rarity, you can live with that. And that's why I think the effort was okay. Like, they lost that game because they missed more shots than they've missed in any game that I've ever watched. They missed 70 shots in that game. But I look at so many of the other losses, and that hasn't been the case. Like, all 3 times they lost against the Raptors, and maybe not that last one in Toronto with so many guys out. But when they've lost against the Raptors, and maybe, I guess, not the first one because they had a ton of guys out in that game too, but they didn't have the right effort. It's not about in these games, because you're always going to make and miss shots, right? But for me, it's about, are you doing the little things properly? Are you taking care of business in those categories? Are you winning the rebounding battles, which is one of the things why I look at Saturday and say, you know what, it just felt weird because the Cavs crushed the Warriors on the glass, right? Like they did those little things. And I think that this is why this season has been so disappointing. Because if the Cavs were putting forth great efforts every night and they just, for whatever reason, because I mean, we're going to get to this coming up in a second, we're just in this crazy shooting slump and they had this record, I think you'd look at it and just be like, you know what, at some point they're going to hit shots, but they're doing the little things right. And the big things ultimately will take care of themselves. And I am somebody that is very much a process over results type of person. And I think the Cavs organizationally very much are wired that way, which is why I think that it's starting to bother them the way they've been playing, because they've not had a very good process and it has led to bad results. And I think earlier this year, they have had some results that sort of masked a bad process. And that's a problem. And right now is the time to fix it. Right now is the time where the team can take a good look in the mirror at who they are as a group and figure out, okay, this needs to change. We need to come together as a group. We need to play for each other. We need to, whatever insert cliche you want to say here about togetherness, about playing hard, about doing things the right way. That's what needs to happen this week. Because I look at this roster still, and the sky isn't falling yet, but it's being held up. It's not way up in the sky. It's inching down. And that's an issue because the Cavs are 14-11. And I think it feels more like they are 9-16 through 25 games and 14-11. But that's all because of expectations. When you are the Cavs and you have the expectations that this group has of being a championship contending team, 14-11 isn't good enough. 14-11 right now would be good enough for the Boston Celtics, given their situations. Instead, they're 15-9. 14-11 would probably be good enough this year for the Detroit Pistons. Instead, they have the best record in the East. 14-11 would be good enough for a lot of teams. 14-11 under no way, shape, or form is good enough for the Cavs. And I think the reason why it's not good enough is because of how they've got there, is because it's been effort, because it's been the wrong spirit, because they haven't done the little things well consistently. And that to me is the number one thing that needs to be fixed. And it's maybe the most difficult thing too, to just say, hey, go fix this. Because I don't know if there's not like a drill that Kenny Atkinson can do in practice for the group and say, yes, this is going to fix our spirit. There's not necessarily like this catch-all metric that says your spirit is bad because of this, because of X. That's not how it works. But the Cavs have, and I think this week with the college football playoff stuff going on, we've heard the term eye test a lot, right? And the Cavs don't have a great resume, to just lean into the college football playoff comparison here. They don't have a great resume right now, which again is fine. The NBA is not a resume-based sport, but they've not passed the eye test either. And I think spirit is something that is very much eye test based. You know it when you see it. We saw it on Friday night. I thought we saw it in Indiana too last Monday. We need to see it much more frequently the rest of the season than what we have seen so far. Now, there's some actual basketball issues like that we do need to talk about that the Cavs need to figure out ways to fix. So we'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools. Or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's robinhood.com/yourmoney, YOUR money, your money, your move. Thank you again for making this Monday edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else. And a reminder about the Everydayer Club that Locked On is launching today. Now you can take the time to level up and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Cavs with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and so much more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. The link is in the show description on YouTube and on your podcast platform of choice. So thing number 2 that I think is very, very important. Maybe not as important as the spirit, joy, effort, energy, whatever term you want to use for that. But the Cavs need to become a better shooting team. They have underwhelmed offensively in large part this year because of two things. Because they have not gotten to the basket as frequently as they should, and because they have missed a ton of three-pointers. The Cavs lead the NBA with 44 three-point attempts per game. And this year, and I wrote about this in my Substack, The Inside Shot, the other day, but this year I believe they are 11-3 when they take 43 or less three-pointers in a game. And that, of course, means that they are 3-8, when they take 44 or more. And some of those games have been like, they had an overtime game where they shot, I think it was 65 threes against Miami in overtime, and that game they lost, which that is certainly going to balloon that average up a little bit. But the Cavs are taking more threes than anybody else in basketball. And the problem is they're not making a lot of them. They're number one in three-point attempts. They're 22nd in three-point field goal percentage. So far, they're shooting 34.3% from beyond the arc this season. Now, part of that is on the injuries, right? When Sam Merrill misses as much time as he has missed, that is something that is going to bring the team's three-point shooting percentage down, because I do believe he is one of the best three-point shooters in basketball. When Darius Garland not only misses as much time as he has missed, but doesn't necessarily look great when he's out there and has not shot the ball all that well quite yet, that brings your three-point percentage down. When Max Strus, who's somebody that the Cavs do rely upon as a shooter, has not played yet this year, that is another thing that brings your three-point percentage down. And this is such a difference from last year, because last year, I believe the Cavs were fourth, if I'm not mistaken, in three-pointers attempted per game. But like the gap between them and number two was not that big. And then Boston was taking like 47 a game. And the Cavs were second in three-point shooting percentage last year. They made 38.3% of their shots from beyond the arc. And that wasn't the only thing. Like, they were elite at so many things offensively, and you don't become the number two offense in terms of efficiency in NBA history by just like, hey, we're going to make a bunch of threes. You have to do a lot of things well to be at that level. And the Cavs did that last year. They're still doing some things well, but, and I do think their three-point shot creation has been better than I feel like it gets credit for, because they've missed so many of them. But their numbers are down in terms of how many of them they're making. And that's the thing that ultimately matters. So this year, the Cavs are shooting, and this is according to Synergy, the Cavs are shooting 28.2% on guarded catch and shoot threes, which is that the best shot in the world? No, of course it's not. But last year, the Cavs shot almost 35% on those looks. And that is a very big, that's a difference of over 6 percentage points. That is something that adds up over time. That's 6% worse this year than last year. On unguarded catch and shoot threes, the Cavs are 4% worse this year than they were last year. I look at that as Lonzo Ball has really struggled. Dean Wade has really struggled. Naquan Tomlin is not necessarily a guy that you want taking catch and shoot threes, but he is getting unguarded catch and shoot threes. Like, all of these things add up because they are shooting 4% worse from beyond the arc. So it's not just that. And like, I do think too, it's worth noting the unguarded catch and shoot threes. That's typically a great look. Like, that is a look that you want to create. The Cavs are creating more of them per game this year than they were last year. And yes, part of it is the pace is up. Like, they are playing more possessions per game, and that does matter into this, but they're doing a good enough job creating those looks. What they're not doing is making those shots. How many times, and I know that Saturday is a crazy example because of how bad they shot in that game, but it felt like they got a lot of unguarded catch and shoot threes. And you know what they did? They didn't make any of them. So I do think the fact that they're just, those shots are not falling is the thing I look at and say, as they get healthier, as they maybe become a little bit less fatigued, because this group has played the most games in the NBA and they've already had 6 back-to-backs. They've had 2 5-7s. And I know that nobody wants to hear that, but that stuff I do think matters when it comes to shooting. Like, how many of the shots that the Cavs just missed short on Saturday against Golden State, to me, was a very clear sign of fatigue for this roster. But I think it's interesting to look at individually how guys are shooting for the Cavs. So last season, every player that was in the top 11 for the Cavs And this is both before and after the trade because George Yang and Karis LeVert qualified for this too. But every player that was in the top 11 for the Cavs, except for Jarrett Allen, he's the one guy that was not. All of them shot better than 35%. All of them. Jarrett Allen did not. That's fine. This year, the Cavs have 5 guys that are shooting 35% or better on threes. Evan Mobley, who's shooting 37%. Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Tyson, Sam Merrill, who is doing it, but I don't even want to say small sample size because he was taking a ton of threes. He just hasn't been out there for 2 weeks now. And Craig Porter Jr. Those are the only 5 guys that are above 35% right now. DeAndre Hunter having a bad season shooting. Darius Garland not shooting the ball very well. Dean Wade, terrible so far. Lonzo Ball has not shot the ball well at all. He's been terrible from behind the arc. So all of those things are, to me, the one thing that does need to get fixed the most offensively. And I do think that the Cavs, and they've done this the past 2 games, they've done this much better the past 2 games than they had before. They need to get into the paint more. So far this year, the Cavs their restricted area attempts are less per game than they were last year. And with the pace being up, I do think that is a little bit of a bigger deal than just like, hey, they're taking 1 shot per game less in the restricted area than they were last year. I think these things are adding up a little bit more because the pace is greater. Like they should be 2 or 3 shots more considering that they are playing more possessions and they are taking more, or they're taking fewer non-restricted area paint 2s as well. So it's not just, oh, they're replacing that with floaters. No, those are being replaced at times with mid-range. Like I do think that their frequency of mid-range shots has been up so far this year. I think a lot of that had to do with the way that Evan was being used early in the season, and he's not necessarily being used the same way now. And some of it is the 3-pointers are up. They're taking more threes this year by right around 4 per game. But I do think that those 2 things offensively are what needs to be fixed. And I purposely didn't talk about defense on this because I look at everything I said in the first segment, and that is so much more of a defensive type of thing. Defense to me, yes, there are physical advantages that guys have. Some guys are bigger, stronger, faster. That's going to tend to make you a good defender. But to me, so much of it is about effort. It's about energy. It's about communication. And I think all of those things just fall into that bucket that I talked about in the first segment. And offensively, like Donovan's been great this year. Evan, I think, has been better lately. And I would like to see him I think that this next 6-game stretch is a really big stretch for Evan Mobley. But I look at all of this and think all of these things can get better. There's no promise that they will, but all of them can. And I think it's really important that it happens this week. And I'll tell you why next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. Boy, did they move fast on Sunday. How about the Cleveland Browns? What a wild game in Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders looked really good. Not going to lie, almost threw for 400 yards. I was impressed. I was very impressed with Shedeur Sanders, and you could have taken Shedeur's over in terms of passing yardage. And no matter, I don't know what FanDuel set it at, but I promise you that bad boy went over. I don't think anyone had him thrown for 390 in accounting for 4 touchdowns in this game. So 1, good for Shedeur, good for the Browns, although they lost. I don't think losing is the worst thing in the world. I would have liked to have seen it be different at the end. Like, well, maybe let's have Shedeur on the field for the 2-point plays. But I don't think the loss is that big of a deal. I think Shedeur Sanders looked good. I think that's a thing to be positive about. But you could have won with FanDuel if you would have bet the over on Shedeur's yardage. And I don't know how, but it updated during the game. I don't know how high it ultimately got, but I'm confident the over probably hit there. So with FanDuel, you could place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight reel worthy moment, all of it can be taken advantage of with FanDuel. Live betting the best when the game starts to shift because a receiver can get hot, defense going to tighten up, or maybe the momentum just flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump in on that moment. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Visit FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you again for making this Monday edition of Locked On Cavs your first watch on YouTube. Please hit that thumbs up button for us as we continue on here. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest from us. And this week, I am close to saying it's now or never for the Cavs this week. So they, as I mentioned earlier, don't play again until Friday. now is the time where this needs to be figured out. After the game on Saturday, Kenny Atkinson talked about this being a great time for the team to sort of press the reset button. And if all goes well, I can already tell you something I will be saying. If this goes the way that I think it can, is that the first 25 games were the preseason for the Cavs. They weren't healthy. They're a different team after, right? Like maybe one of the things that I will do is I will be tracking how they are before and after this break, right? Like what's their offensive rating? How are they defensively? What do they look like? Do they pass the eye test? All those things. This will be a cutoff for it. And I think it's important too, because if you look at what happened last year, the Indiana Pacers at this mark had played 25 games. They were 10-15. So they were in worse shape than the Cavs. And yes, the Pacers did not come into last season, I think, with super lofty expectations, but they dealt with early injuries, just like the Cavs have. And they had actually accomplished more in the postseason at that point than the Cavs had because they went to the conference finals the year before. So I look at that and say, is this a comparable thing? And I think it is, and I think it isn't. And the Cavs will hopefully be getting healthier. I don't know if Sam Merrill is going to be able to play on Friday. I think Jared Allen might be a little bit closer, but I'm not positive on that. We will see what they look like in terms of health. But this was the week that the Pacers really turned their season around. Like I said, they were 10-15 going into this week. And then after this week, from this point forward, they only, I believe, lost 15 games the rest of the year. Or maybe it was 17. They were winning, essentially, at the same clip the Cavs were last year after this week. And that included, because this NBA Cup break last year for the Cavs, which I think is an important thing to note, one, their first add-on game was against the Wizards, which it's the same thing this year. And two, it started a 12-game winning streak for the Cavs. And this one, I think, has the ability to, at the very least, should start a 6-game winning streak for the Cavs. Had they not lost to Golden State on Saturday, we'd be looking at what I think should be an 8-game winning streak, so long as the Cavs take care of business. And then you go to MSG for Christmas and see what happens. But I also look at the Cavs schedule, and yes, it's easy in terms of opponents. They play Charlotte a couple times. They play Washington. They play Chicago a couple of times, who are just a nightmare of a team. I think they're like 3-15 after their 6-0 start. They've been horrible. And those are games the Cavs should win. But now the Cavs also, after playing the most games in the NBA today, the Cavs have a back-to-back coming up 2 weeks from today. It is the 22nd and 23rd. They play host to the Charlotte Hornets on the 22nd. Then they play host to the New Orleans Pelicans on the 23rd. That's their next back-to-back. After that, they don't have another back-to-back for a full month. So while, yes, the Cavs are basically going to be playing every other day, we should see a more well-rested team. Like, we should see the Cavs have an opportunity to catch a rhythm here and not feel like they're always playing their third game in 4 nights. And that, I think, is a very important thing to think about. Now, yes, the schedule toughens up after Christmas, where they go Knicks, Rockets, Spurs, Phoenix been playing really well, Denver, Detroit. Like, that's a tough stretch, certainly. But I think that this upcoming stretch, given what this week could provide for the Cavs, I think this upcoming stretch is a really big deal. And that's why I think that I'm hesitant to say now or never. But if it doesn't happen now, like if the Cavs don't come out of this week feeling and looking much different, then I think it's time to like really be concerned about where this team is headed and what this ceiling ultimately looks like on this group. But I think they do, while I think they have lost a lot of the benefit of the doubt, this to me is like the last straw. It's, if it doesn't get figured out now, they're going to be doubted the rest of the year, and they deserve to be. But I think that this is the chance for them to really get it ironed out, to really get it figured out. And we're going to learn a lot about this team. I said this going into this week, and we did learn a lot about the Cavs this past week. We're going to learn a lot more about the Cavs between now and the end of this month. And I think that's why December is the most important month. And that's why this week is the most important week of the season for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Cavs. I do want to put out there, with it being the 25-game mark, with it being the NBA Cup break, I think now is a very good time for a mailbag episode. I will be doing a mailbag episode at some point this week. If you want in on the mailbag episode, there are 2 things you can do. You can email me, locavsmailbag@gmail.com. That is in the episode description. Or you can join the Everydayers Club. A link to join is in the description. That will set you up on a Discord that I am on. And if you want to ask a question for the mailbag episode, drop it in the Discord. I will see it there. I will tell you you're in the mailbag episode, and we will talk through it on an episode of Locked On Cavs coming up later this week. Not sure what day it's going to be. Also, one other programming note before we get out of here. Because the Cavs don't play until Friday, and they've got 2 games this week, I am planning on having a mini whip around episode, but I'm not going to do it later in the week. I didn't necessarily think it made sense to do on Monday, given the fact that the Cavs don't play for 4 days. By the time that we get to the Cavs taking on the Wizards on Friday, that stuff won't necessarily be fresh in your mind. I think that it's probably better something to come out on Thursday of this week. So just a heads up there will not be a whip around episode later today. There will be one hopefully on Thursday, but you'll have to wait and see for that. So thank you for making this edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. And thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts and YouTube as well. Hit that thumbs up button as we get out of here. And I will see you tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.